Good evening and welcome to another episode of the Edufuturists podcast. I was just about to start with the number then and forgot which one it was, so I definitely won't go there. But welcome on a snowy, regarding where you are. It might be snowy Thursday evening, and good to have you with us as always. We're excited for tonight. Our guests, we've got two people joining us to talk about our discussion points tonight. But without further ado, should we do the normal stuff? How's our week been, lads? How's it going? Ben?
Mine's been pretty full on, like every other week. Usually I tell a story of I feel like I'm going everywhere. If anybody follows me on LinkedIn, if you don't, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I wrote a post on Sunday about last week and what I did, and it felt like, how do you fit that much stuff in? That was the conversations that most people said. So yeah, I've done some did some marketing training with some businesses, which has been quite interesting, and I've done some coaching on that stuff as well today, which has been very, very interesting. Working one-to-one with some small and medium enterprises, looking at their digital stuff, particularly around how they're using social media and stuff. So that's been good fun, and yeah, it's been cold though. It's been Baltic in Lancashire, as I like to say. It's not been the nicest day. I've been sat close to this little mini heater that's underneath my desk. I haven't got a hot water bottle yet, but that might well be in the offing this evening. What about you two, Dan? How's yours been?
All right, yeah. Oh, it's like passing the parcel. Steve asked you how you've been. You asked me.
And then are you going to ask Steve, or are you just going to ignore him?
No, he's not. He better not do.
All right, yeah. I've been bunkered into this room for the last 7 days. Writing, as I'm not sure if I mentioned. I think I might have mentioned it last week. So we've got a book coming out at the end of the month about artificial intelligence and education. So the deadline's the end of this week. So yeah, it's the rush is on. So just in here, kind of writing and editing. So it's interesting process. But yeah. I literally have got nothing else to say. What else have I done? Oh, I did some training for some schools in Florida yesterday. That feels like a long time ago.
Trek.
Yeah, it was.
Just in and out in the day.
Yeah. Yeah, Steve, what about yourself?
Dan, I'm just calling it out. You seem broken, mate. You need to get out of the house. I think you've got cabin fever.
I went to. I left the house this morning for the first time in a few days. Went to IKEA to have some breakfast. That was the extent of it.
IKEA did they do meatballs at breakfast?
Oh no, you don't want meatballs at breakfast. Full English breakfast though, or full Scottish breakfast if
full breakfast, just full breakfast, non-nationality.
Square sausage, is a Scottish tradition.
Is that part of a potato cake? Paula, give us a thumbs up. Is that a potato cake part of a Scottish breakfast?
Are you just making things up?
Yeah.
I'm not being funny. Ask
haggis. That's
no, let's not offend people before they even come on. Come on.
Haggis is on a Scottish breakfast.
Why?
Julia, my fiance was up in Berwick with her family the other day, and they had one of these how you get these meal kits from the supermarket that have like all the Indian food in.
Yeah.
So it's like a meal kit for two.
Haggis? There's a haggis in it?
There was haggis pakoras in there.
What? Nice. That sounds
nice, to be fair.
Yeah, it does,
nice.
Yeah, apparently it's just like deep fried haggis. It does sound nice, but yeah, I'm not traditionally Indian, I don't think.
Who knows?
Yeah. Well, it is from the country that brought us deep fried Mars bars. And everything else that goes with it. I can't believe it. Nobody else could see this.
Defend her country here. I think
the guests
are
backstage or were backstage because what's happened is they've decided to leave us because we've offended them so much. Which usually happens. It's then just us free chatting. My week's been good. Thanks for asking, Dan. Appreciate it.
Thanks for letting us know, mate. Should we get on with the show?
Of course we can. This week I've been out of the house and I've been for a few weeks now. Before that, I was bunkered down, and my wife said to me, "Have you been out of the house this week?" And I said, "Yeah, I put the bins out." What a sad state of affairs. Dan, you're probably feeling the same. Your idea of fun this week has been going to IKEA, which is definitely not my breakfast. Sad time.
Did you get any photo frames?
Honestly, it's like there's like a community there. I think they all go every morning.
Just because you get
community-
coffee and tea for 50p, that's why, or whatever it is.
I'm blown away. I don't know what to say.
Full English breakfast, £3.50. And if you've got
I'm
your
going, to
IKEA
be fair.
family
Right, you
card,
sold. I'm a Yorkshireman. I drink out of dirty puddles. I'll pay £3.50 for.
Anyway.
But yeah, so it's been a good week. I've been having conversations, lots of conversations. This week I've been at DigiFest through JISC and some great stuff. Saw a wonderful talk by Arizona State and some of the stuff they've been doing, and AI and some other stuff. Really, really good. And yeah, I've enjoyed catching up with people, but you forget, when you stood up for 2 days, I was heading for the train and I could see them opening cancer. Like, so excited to just sit down, have a cup of tea and a chocolate bar. Got to the train, it was delayed. Because it had come from the south, they decided to get rid of a few of the carriages and give that train away to somebody else. It was stood back to back. I was stood up for an hour and a half. And as a traditional Yorkshireman, I didn't say anything. I just moaned to myself the whole way home without drinking a cup of tea. But I've done enough waffle.
Yeah.
Should we, I guess. Thanks.
Paula,
So
haggis pakoras. Have you had them before?
Haggis pakora is absolutely a thing, and my favourite Indian restaurant in Glasgow will offer courses on how to make them every Sunday afternoon. So I would highly recommend. I'm not a fan of the little furry haggis myself, but yeah, I know quite a lot of folk that are. In fact, I was just the reason I couldn't come on there. I'd nipped down our local chippy, who with Easter coming are doing deep fried cream eggs. So that's another.
Oh, that's tragic, Paula.
But can I just mention about cream eggs? The butcher that we used to go to, he did cream egg Scotch eggs. So literally, it was a cream egg covered in sausage meat, and then whatever, which sounds like it was revolting. So I'm not sure what I think about that. Anyway, sorry.
No, it's all good. All good. Highly recommend. Yeah. It's cuts another 45 years off the life expectancy of the diet.
Steve's going to be dead.
That and Buckfast literally will be taking decades off you, and never mix Buckfast, deep fried cream egg and haggis pakora. But if it is for £3.50 at IKEA, I'll have it for a breakfast because again I'm a Yorkshireman. And it sounds like a cheap deal to me. So, should we introduce you to our guest? Is Gordon and Paula from CDN. Gordon, do you want to come in and tell us a bit about yourself, and then Paula, if you want to come in, and then just kind of the organisation and what it's set out to achieve, I suppose.
Sure. Yeah. Well, good evening, everyone. Or hi. And so I'm Gordon. I'm the Senior Manager for Research and Enhancement at CDN. And as you can hear, I'm not a Scotsman. I'm a Cornishman living in Scotland who has lived in Scotland for 23 years. So we're not even going to open up the food chat around what a Cornishman living in Scotland would eat. But deep fried pasties are not on the agenda as far as I'm aware. But we could start a trend. I thought Paula was going towards pizza crunch there for a minute, which is maybe something we can pick up on another time. But I think just to tell you a little bit about CDN, and then I'll hand over to Paula to talk a bit about her role as well. CDN is the College Development Network in Scotland. So we are a government-funded through the Scottish Funding Council agency, and our job is training and development for the college sector in Scotland. And I think it's important to kind of get out there straight away that you'll hear us referring to the college sector and not the FE sector. And that's because we don't have an FE sector in Scotland. We have a college sector which operates from school level all the way up to degree level and honours degree level and teaches everything in between. And that's actually really relevant to what particularly Paula will be talking about in terms of the things that we do, the things that we work with. So we're not just talking post-16 education here. We're talking pretty much everything about education that the college sector engages with. And CDN, as I say, we're the training and development agency. So we provide all sorts of training and support and networks to help develop practice, not just for learning and teaching staff, but for support staff, professional services staff, all the way up to leadership. We do leadership programs all the way up to principals, executive leadership, and we support the board development network as well. So we provide a training program for college boards. So everything about people who work in colleges is supported by us with the aim of ultimately having a strong impact on the learners. And the Research and Enhancement Centre, this was the thing, we're just about 2 years old. And it's an amazing privilege to be part of what we do in the research centre, because what we really do is uncover, share and develop practice. So put in a nutshell, we're paid to be curious and ask curious questions about what happens in colleges, what works, why, how do they make it work, and then how do we shine a light on that and support the colleges to do more of it and to expand and innovate along the lines that they're doing. So it's a lot of it's about finding out what's actually happening and then saying, how do we tell people about it, understand it, and particularly where Paula comes in is how do we actually get them doing more of it. So I'll chuck to Paula at that point and say, do you want to kind of lead on?
I'll come in and say a wee bit more about the stuff. Yeah, as Gordon says, first of all, it's a great place to work, a College Development Network, and the Research and Enhancement Centre's really exciting place to be just now. So I've come in, I'm work along with Gordon, I'm the lead for Research and Enhancement. So a lot of my work, obviously, as Gordon said, is that inquisitive side of things, is understanding what's happening in the college sector. I think quite often colleges and what they do can be misrepresented or misunderstood. There's just a lack of knowledge around the huge array of amazing things colleges can do. So my job is to get out there and sort of shine a light on that fantastic stuff that's happening. I've come through college myself as an adult returner, so I'm pretty passionate about the amazing opportunities college can provide. And the other thing is, the other half of my role is enhancement. So really we're all about bringing on great practice. There's great practice out there in our colleges just now, and my role is to sort of, continue that, embed it, make sure that the work we're doing, is supported through the work of CDN and through the work of the Research and Enhancement Centre. So quite often I've got boots on the ground. I'm out and about in colleges, chatting to staff, chatting to learners, chatting to the various support agencies and people who use the college. And there's a broader range of people who use the college, so my job is really interesting and really diverse. So that's what I do.
It's just interesting just to jump on that. And I think I remember when I was in education, especially when I was a lecturer or in further education. I wasn't at university standing in a lecture hall. I was just a lecturer and became a teacher as they changed titles and things. And research was as a subject, especially when I was an early practitioner, that really scared me, because I'd come out of university and it was like, no offense, Paula and Gordon, but it sounded really boring. I was like, it sounds like I'm going to have to do a lot of writing, and how do I get involved in it? And
you're a PE teacher, so
exactly. So I'm used to kicking, running, skipping, and jumping, and getting out. To be fair, talking about the weather, just to go back on it, I'm glad I'm not a PE teacher anymore. I'll be stood up outside in freezing cold today, so I'm glad I'm sitting behind a desk now. But it was something that, how do we get, just as a kind of opening bit, how have you gone through that whole process, and to go off on a tangent, how do you get people involved and passionate about research, selling it to and getting them engaged? How does that work as an organisation straight off the bat? Of it sounds absolutely wonderful, but is that your challenge, Paula? And is it the fact that you're on the ground doing it and showing them how easy it is and how you're supporting it, rather than it being this encompassing thing that they have to spend hours doing on top of everything else they've got to do, I guess?
Absolutely. And I think that's the thing, that one of the challenges I have, that a lot of people see research with that kind of capital R, if you like, that big R, and my job is to go in and show research, of course, can be that. It can be that sort of ivory tower or very high level of research, which is incredibly important, incredibly valuable, and lots of people are working on that. But research is really just inquiry. That's all it is. And what we're trying to do at the Research and Enhancement Centre is sort of turn that inquiry, asking the how, the what, the why kind of questions, and actually turning that into, okay, well, how, what, and why can I actually input this, or where can I input this in my everyday practice? So that's really what we do. Things like action research, I think both of those words are really terrifying. Action, suggests that somebody should be doing something that perhaps they feel they're not, or it's something extra that they need to be doing. And as you say, research, is seen as, something that's maybe above someone or beyond somebody. But for a lot of our practitioners, for a lot of our lecturers, for a lot of our support staff, they're actually doing amazing things as well. And if you sit and you think about your practice, you think about your day, you're actually inquiring, you're conducting some research, and through that reflective and reflexive practice, that's where change comes, and that's really what we're trying to encourage. So that's how I would bring it down. And it probably helps as well that you go in like me in a unconventional dress and you're not tweed tweeded out, and you're not coming in with fancy sort of things hanging. We're normal people, researchers, and it's great that more and more of our college staff, see a place for themselves in research, and particularly in putting projects and initiatives into action.
Yeah, and as I'm hearing that, I'm thinking to myself, you touched on that thing about reflection and about reflective practice, and that really resonates with me as probably someone who has always been quite, and the lads are going to laugh when I say this, who has always been like self-critical, in the sense that of everything I've done, everything I do, I'm always like, could I have done that a little bit better? What about this? I do too many ers and too many r's, and have I gone talking too long? Should I got the students doing a little bit more? All them kind of things that you think about, but in practice, what this means is that you're encouraging people not just to carry on going. Actually, let's just stop, look at what's working, look at what's not working, and let's do more of what's working. And it's really interesting that probably that would be, I'm going to be controversial, sorry, it's what I do. Just imagine if actually that was how we worked in the whole of education, in the sense that, and people saying, oh yes, we do have research informed practice. Yeah, but the DFE really don't in England. They just basically say, here's a new thing, let's do that. Here's a new thing, let's do that. Or because if you did the research on Ofsted, for instance, there'd be an interesting. I think there'd be an interest in the impact of Ofsted in schools. I think you'd actually get the information that they don't want to hear or see. Anyway, or about exams, like you'd see the impact that you always want to see. So ultimately, and I'm not saying that you guys should think that or whatever else, but I think what we're saying is what we're agreeing on is the principle of stopping, looking at what we're doing, thinking, does this work? Do we need to tweak this? Do we need to get better? And Dan introduced us all to a book a few months ago called the 3-box model, which is about this idea of understanding that everything that you do from a strategic perspective needs to either engineer the present, make sure that it works really, really well, box 1 stuff. Box 2, get rid of stuff that we don't want to do anymore, that's not working, that's holding us back. And then box 3, thinking about this, well, what could we do differently and how could we get excited about it? And I know that's just one model and one framework, but I think actually, in order to be able to put things into each one of those boxes, you need research, you need to stop, you need to think about what's working and what's not. So it's super valuable, but I almost agree with Steve there that it's almost seen as a bit of a highbrow concept. And actually, if I am honest, I think a lot of researchers like that kind of academic, we're cleverer than you, we'll tell you how it is type mentality. Not you, Paula, obviously.
Well, they've never met me then. No, we've never met me.
No, but it can be like that, can't it?
It can be that, and I think that's what we're challenging as well. But a lot of the research that we do as well is not always about getting things right, and the way we use the phrase when I go in to speak to the tutors, to the lecturers, to the staff, it's about learning from the learning. That's a kind of cheesy line, but it's really, really important. And research and doing things differently, it could just be adding on, it could be enhancing something that we do already and just making a slight tweak to it as well. I think there's always that sort of misconception as well about bringing projects in that we have to change immediately what we're doing. And just as you said, that it has to be the next best thing. And that's really difficult to try and embed good practice if someone was to see someone like me coming into a college and just assume I'm going to throw the baby out with the bathwater every time I come in. There's really good practice happening out there. And as I mentioned earlier, that's part of the really great job that I have at the Research and Enhancement Centre, is shining a light on really good stuff that's happening and actually sharing that with colleagues jumping on board and saying, look, I want a little bit more of that. It's almost creating that FOMO, that sort of fear of missing out that everybody's talking about on Insta and all those other places that I try and avoid at the moment.
But I think coming in on that, I think that the point is that a lot of the people we work with don't have the time to do that for themselves in terms of shining a light. So in a way, part of our role is to do that, because when you're busy and you're down there and you're doing the job and you're getting on with it and you're doing really innovative stuff, but you're doing it. And there's a couple of points there. Is one, people often don't think they're being innovative. So they think it's just what I do. And it takes us to go and say, wow, this is amazing. We want to find out more about it and talk about it. And, then people will say, I don't have the space or the time to, we often say to people, write us a blog or write an article, and so I'm too busy. Well, we can do that for you. And going back to the point you were making there, Ben, I think also it's about not giving people extra. So that practice, that habit of mind of being a reflective practitioner and doing what you were describing, of stopping and reflecting and, that stop, start, continue kind of approach, that is about encompassing that within what people do, because we found very rapidly, if we imply that we want people to do lots of new projects, go off and do lots of stuff in a sector which is strapped for cash, really busy, really stressed, the last thing they want is us to say, here's a big new project we want you to get involved in. So a lot of the model is saying, let's look at what you're doing and help you to innovate within that and expand within that, so it improves outcomes and doesn't burden you with more things that you need to do. It's about working smarter. And I know that's a cliche, but it really it's really what being a reflective practitioner allows you to do.
Yeah, and we've brought in this Step Forward programme, which we're really excited about at the Research and Enhancement Centre. And it's really about sort of building capacity as well, as Gordon said, against that sort of context of a sort of strapped, time-pressured environment. It's about actually showing people that there's targeted support there, and we're wanting them off the back of some of the key strands of work that we're doing to be able to develop some actions, projects, if you want to call them that, again with a small p, but it's getting them to look at the practice and try new things, or maybe do more of the great things that they're already doing. So at CDN, our Step Forward programme will support existing initiatives. So I kind of go in almost, I suppose, as a kind of initial consultant. I go in and chat to colleges. I find out what it is that they're doing just now, try and understand where they are and where they're hoping to get to. And then we look at maybe bringing in a tailored package of support for them. So that might be helping them actually scope out a project, because maybe not sure how to do that, or it may well be that they need some evaluation support, or perhaps they're not so good, as Gordon said, about actually shining a light on what they do. So they maybe need to work on how they can highlight and get that impact out there that they're doing. So we've got that sort of strand that we support initiatives and projects in colleges for project teams. But we're also working with individual researchers and college staff as well. So we're looking at training perhaps people who might not traditionally, as you've said, seen research has been something for them. So again, we can give them a fantastic opportunity to build up their own research skills through developing research proposals, learning how to work with data. And there's lots of exciting ways to work with data. I think even data is a scary word for a lot of people, but there's exciting ways to work with that kind of thing. And we can show them how to write for academic journals, how to analyse data. So there's a whole load of things that we do, but you'll get from that what we're trying to do is support the great work that's going on, support the amazing staff that we have in the college sector, and actually just get things moving as well. That's what we're all about here.
And some of that, I think, is about connecting. So the other thing that we have that ability to do is range across the sector, so that what we're doing is connecting similar practice in different colleges and beginning to bring people together. And that's important for the research network, is to say, let's put people together who are working in different colleges who might, even in Scotland, which is obviously a smaller sector than, say, in England, it's still very dispersed, and there's still people don't necessarily know each other. So actually that linking that we do to say, and also that helps us to build a picture of where we might go next with our research work and our reports, is to say, what you get very rapidly is everything's connected. So, we can talk about our poverty work, but the poverty work connects to the school college work that we're doing in the transition from school to college. It connects to the digital work and looking at how colleges engage with digital. That everything's connected thing is something that we can provide the kind of glue for, and then begin to kind of get an overall picture. Because sometimes it's about people don't know what the sector does and might make assumptions about what the sector do. And so a lot of what we can do is say, well, actually, here's what's happening. You might think we're not doing something about this, but actually we are.
Interestingly, I'm thinking last week I was quite privileged to be able to facilitate a discussion with the CBI and some employers in our area. And obviously the CBI they told us they represent 200,000 businesses in the UK. And so one of the things that they're doing is trying to find pockets of, we know somebody who's doing this really well, why don't you go and shadow that? And I spoke to, I'm chair of governors at a primary school, and I was speaking to some of the teachers there just this last week, and I was saying, actually, there's Ofsted are in. I know I've bashed Ofsted twice tonight, but Ofsted are in one of the local schools down the street, and they were like, I could really do with him not coming in, and then the school advisor was saying, I think we should get rid of Ofsted. And I was like, oh, that's interesting coming from a school advisor. But one of the things that the teachers said would, surely it would be better if we could share practice, somebody who's doing something really, really well. And rather than having somebody coming in and giving us a judgment and this and that and the other, actually a self-evaluation of realizing we need some support on this. We're not doing particularly well on this, but these people, through a connection way, and that's what it sounds like what you're doing there, is that ability to be able to go, these people are doing this really well, these people want to learn about doing it really well, we'll be the bridge in between. So I think that really matters. And also, like you said, that the projects and stuff that you work on they're not silos, are they? You're seeing actually the stuff that we're working on, like you said, in terms of digital, connects to the elements that we need to know in terms of poverty. So I think we were really excited when we had the opportunity to speak to you about this work around poverty and some of the stuff that ties into it in the work that you've been doing. So I wonder if you could go there and give us a little bit of an insight about that.
Will I maybe start, Paula, with a bit of how we got to where we got to, and then Paula's the one who's done all the real value-based work on this. But in terms of the history of it, way back before the centre was created, CDN were asked by a group of principals to do something around what are the issues facing the sector in Scotland around poverty. And they commissioned an organisation called Institute for Public Policy Research Scotland to do a report. And I picked that up when we started the centre, and they produced a very interesting report, which is quite detailed about the challenges facing society, particularly in Scotland. There were a number of think pieces about how does that potentially impact on education. And it was a really interesting report. But when we looked at it and when we published it, we said that this is all great, but this doesn't really connect to what a college is actually doing on the ground, working with students and communities. So that set us on the path that's ended up where we are now with the development of the centre. And we wanted to take a more practice-based approach to it by saying, well, actually, let's look more at case studies. Let's look more at what colleges are actually doing and draw lessons from that. So we commissioned from Paula and another researcher. At this point, Paula wasn't working for the organisation. She's one of our research pool. An initial report looking at 4 different colleges, the kind of projects they were doing about transitioning students into college and sustaining them at college, and then moved on to a third report, which looked in more detail again. So there's been a process of let's examine, again, as I was saying earlier on, examine what's happening, what makes it successful, what are the issues, and it becomes very, very specific. So you move from this, yeah, there are economic issues facing society and food poverty issues facing society, right down to how do you help a student who is coming into a college and hasn't had breakfast or is struggling with family issues. So the latest report we've just published, which we're really, really excited by, is the one around West Lothian College. So I'll let Paula talk a little bit about how we got to that one.
Yeah, and I'll probably go back to the second report where I came in, and it was really about understanding the environment and the landscape of colleges and learners and the communities in which they operate. As Gordon said, it's really important that we know that. So there was 5 key themes that were picked up in the second report about things that colleges do, and this is what I'm really passionate about, is saying that college is not just a building, you know, it's so much more than that, and I think we're constantly sort of challenging that idea. So the second in the series of reports, Pathways from Poverty, really looked at colleges for communities, and it was about showing that colleges are creating safe spaces. They're kind of bridging the gap between learners and the college themselves. So you've maybe got people coming back into education or, just frightened of education, maybe had a negative experience or maybe just don't know what it's all about. So, actually colleges are out there, and we saw that, they're doing really innovative things, creating, safe havens within the college actually, but also making the college less a frightening place to come to. Colleges were, another theme was working in partnership. They were really fostering close links with their communities, community groups, agencies, all of that kind of thing, as well as direct sort of actions, interventions on poverty, tackling things like food food poverty through giving free breakfasts, providing free lunch, maybe giving out care packages to learners as well at key pinch points in the year. And that's really important for learners as well. To, you know, the fact that they're seen and they're heard is really important, and that they feel that they're safe and that they're looked after. That really helps sort of sustain their learning. So we'll come back and maybe touch on some of the things in a minute. But yeah, all of this leads to supporting really positive transitions for the learners. And part of my role is one of the other themes was looking at the sustainability of that, embedding good practice. So as an adult returner to education myself, I'm probably more privileged than a lot of learners, but still experienced that difficulty of returning to education as a mum with young children, you know, having given up a job that wasn't particularly well paid, so there wasn't loads of savings in the bank, and then, you know, coming into education, and it's tough, you know, even sometimes just finding the bus fare to come to college, you know, before you've even thought about anything else. So poverty impacts people in a whole range of ways, and there are some communities which, you know, are really struggling with high levels of poverty. And one of the things that we want to do is look at the great practice that colleges are doing, the great things that they're doing, actually in challenging that, to actually sort of change the story just from the poverty. The reports are called Pathways from Poverty, and that's what's really important. It's about the opportunities, it's about the support, it's about the networks that colleges are putting in place. So that comes out through the second report. And the third report sort of details down, after looking at it was about 4 projects we looked at in the second report. We focused on West Lothian College in the third report, who actually have this sort of mantra, this ethos of leading with empathy and vision, which I just think is absolutely amazing. You know, I think that's, everybody should be doing that as a human being, leading with empathy and vision. And they were really looking at, you know, understanding the poverty and other adverse, whether it's adverse childhood experiences or other traumas. It's actually understanding that this sort of trauma-informed practice really is all about, you know, it's grounded in the idea of understanding that exposure to any kind of trauma really does affect you neurologically, affects you psychologically, and it affects you socially as well. So, you know, if we're looking at sustaining learners, if we're looking at helping communities, you know, find a way out of poverty, find a way into sort of opportunity, then we really need to look at the individual within that story as well. And that's very much what the case study focuses on. It's the way in which, just by leading with empathy and vision, just by having that trauma-informed approach, that learners who might have been more likely to be disengaged with education and miss those opportunities are actually really been sort of brought in and you know, given a bit of a warm cuddle actually from education, which is something that they've maybe not had before.
It's fascinating, actually, just listening to it. And it does link into, whether it's poverty, I think it's more trauma, but there is a large-scale trauma, and I don't know if it affects the UK as a whole, because I know there's the different process in regards to the qualifications that they sit. But and we've talked about it often, and around GCSE and maths and English resits, and the ability to where the funding stream comes as people step into what is FE sector beyond, and the trauma and the impact of the reasons why people disengage with exams, the potential things that have impacted when they've been sitting that exam, because we're still in that, but also the result. And I don't think there's anything. I'm really interested to kind of explore, because I don't think there's anything done of what the trauma and the impact of a person that is coming and potentially is sitting there maths and English for the second, third, fourth, 7th time, rather than just resitting it and recycling it. That whole thing of, you know, different approaches, you know, empathy, understanding that they might want to achieve, there might be some barriers, but also like the fact that, you know, the unpicking of I don't want to say baggage, but the real stress that they're bringing to a class to think, well, I failed it 7 times, you know. How would you unpick that? Because teachers and the education system, just speaking about England, isn't prepared for it. And how do we create something and support something and cascade this out now beyond what you guys are doing in Scotland and West Lothian? And I think the Mandens, that little. I think there's a quote in the report, the third one, when it's like, I think the lady's name was something Gibraltar, is it? and she talked about the wee man caves and how there's like spaces with soft furnishings. That it jumped out at it because it was like a quote and it was a wee, and I was like, how Scottish? But anyway, and it's like all about the approach of how to be able to go that. It linked to a college I'd seen in Wales called Cambria in a visit last year through my work, that had created a massive scale bit of, not a man cave, but for everybody, with soft furniture, different lightings, where people could just literally say, I'm not for it today, right now. And that would be criticised in many audiences. Oh, well, you go home then. If you're not here to learn, go. Well, how can we? I'm waffling a lot, but I think what does that look like? How does it put in place? Is there a massive investment that an organisation like West Lothian has to make to have a setup of not just educators, but the wraparound service that provide to try and unpick that and support those people through trauma and kind of get them back into being excited for learning? I think
the West Lothian example is really good, and it's one example. There's lots of colleges, all of our colleges are trauma informed, aware, and lots of colleges are doing great things. We picked West Lothian. We know that there was a lot of things going on there. The Trust project, if I can maybe mention initially, is very much based in that trauma informed practice, and it's about recognising that for a learner coming over the door who maybe has had an adverse childhood experience, or who is maybe neurologically, that they're suffering with whatever it may be. Maybe, dyslexia has given them a negative idea of what school is because they maybe didn't do very well their first time. They may be, Asperger's, other kind of things, neurodiverse challenges. So it's actually about understanding that for a learner to come through the door, the physical door of a college is quite intimidating. So that's their first kind of starting point, is understanding that is a scary process. So they bring them in. They have, as you say, what they call the Den at West Lothian, which is a space with soft furnishings. The staff there are lovely and friendly. And they just gradually bring the learners in. And if you read the third report, you'll see that other agencies who are working with learners who have maybe disengaged from education actually start that process. It's not the case always that the learner suddenly decides, I want to turn up at college. Fair enough if they do, but quite often the learners who are coming to somewhere like the Trust project are already working with other agencies because the time in education hasn't worked. So they're brought in gradually into a space that's welcoming, a space that's non-threatening, and they're given credit actually for coming into the building. So it may well be that West Lothian have been building, for example, bespoke courses, so the learners can go and there's bespoke ways that they can go through their programme, and it gives them tasters of other different subjects that they can learn. And I think as well, one of the quotes that's really stuck with me is an example of an absolutely brilliant IT manager at West Lothian College, Tom Thompson, who says, he will look at, the registers, for example, to make sure that a person coming in, if they're in the Den, they still have the credit for being in the college. And he said, whatever we do, we need to make sure that what we do is right for the students. It's not right for our systems, and it's about, making sure that the systems work for the learner. So the staff all work together. There may be a lecturer, and we've got one example of that in the third report, of a lecturer who was aware there was someone in her class who just didn't seem to be engaging and was becoming maybe a bit disruptive within the class. There was clearly things going on, and the lecturer made a referral there to the Trust project. The learner went off to the Trust project and they work their magic. They do what they do with the learner. And, as the lecturer said, I don't really need to know what the Trust project do. I don't need to know about the learner's backstory. You've got that sort of safe, protected environment for the learner as well. And the learner went off, went through what she did with the Trust project and was able to come back into the class and be actually one of the best performing students that year. So it's about sort of seeing the individual, and it's leading with empathy, it's leading with vision. It's not been short-sighted about a learner. And I think that process of repeating a module over and over again, if you keep doing what you always did, you're going to get what you always got, so we actually have to change things. We have to do things slightly differently. So that's just one of the ways that the Trust project in West Lothian leads. But what I think is really valuable in that particular case study is that they have a whole college ethos to this. They have a whole college approach to understanding the learner and understanding that, you know, for someone to be successful in their learning, we really have to understand them. Now, whether that's a bunch of young guys coming in and meeting with the computing guy and they've set up the man cave, how amazing that you can go and, you know, have your gaming space and space to talk, you know. That's just fantastic, you know, and somewhere like the man cave where it was actually set up by the lecturers, the principal there's got a great approach to giving the staff and the students autonomy and actually saying what's needed, you know, setting up the man cave, which meets in a space that they found in the college. So in terms of resources, the room was there. You know, it didn't take a lot to do that. The resource was there, man cave was set up. They meet there, I think it's once a week or once every fortnight that they meet, you know, and they do things, but there's also space to chat, which guys, particularly I think in Scotland, really don't do culturally. It's just something that doesn't happen. So it's a great space, but it's also used across, you know, for other things. That room is used for women, maybe more mature students coming in and returning to education, maybe in their sort of, you know, mid-40s or older, who feel that going to the canteen is a bit frightening, you know what I mean? So that man cave then doubles up as a space for, you know, women to go and have a sandwich and have a coffee and have a chat with somebody else. So it's just this whole college approach to looking at the complex and diverse range of learners that they have, trying to understand and seeing the college as being there for the learner, you know, and trying to make sure that the learner feels comfortable fitting into that space. That's really what they do.
And I think, you know, that picking up that last point before we go on is that a lot of colleges all have strategies and they have values and so on. And when you analyze them, they all say pretty much the same thing. They'll all say excellence in learning, innovation, all these other things. And if you look at West Lothians, one of their key statements in their values is when we say we're learner-centered, we mean it. And I think that's everybody says they're learner-centered, but actually to be learner-centered, you've got to be doing all the things that Paul has just described there, that, you know, you are empowering staff to be able to make decisions to put the learner first and to have that, you know, as you sort of alluded to earlier on, I think that if you're having problems, there's something in between the lecture room, the classroom, and not being in the college. And it's almost as simple as that. It's having a safety net that says we've got support for you, that means there's something in between the two. And if you arrive not able to learn for whatever reason, we will support you to be in a position to go and learn. And that's really, really powerful. And it is difficult to kind of carve out the space to do that. But West Lothian's approach is we don't have any choice but to do this, because that's how you become learner-centered, is by everybody in the college being alert to the challenges that people face and how they can, you know, be present in the college in a positive way.
Yeah, I think there's many different facets to it. I think as colleges have and education has become a business, there is this whole thing in terms of schools of offloading for those kids who have got behaviour issues. And yeah, we really tackle and support behaviour, but do they send them out and pay colleges to run their curriculum and everything else? But actually, in colleges, there's in England, there's a 42-day rule, all of those kind of things. And if they're going to drop out, let's get rid of them early. Let's get rid of them early because we don't want them on, and it'll affect funding and everything else. And I get it in terms of one element of it, but I'm like, it's just, for me, it's just, that's not education. Like, you know, there are going to be challenges, and I understand it, that some people will just not achieve for whatever reason, that you could try and support them all you want, and there will be those people that just get to the end of the year and just something beyond the control of the individual often and the organisation that they're attending, they're just not going to get to a point where they've got the capacity to learn and submit and be classed as an achiever. But I remember when I was in education, probably one of the things that I often talk about, but one of the things that I was most proud of was the creation of something called the iMark. I had some real challenges trying to get it off the ground. It was an opportunity. I was looking at attendance. Nobody likes to tackle attendance. It's one of those things that is passed around badly. To then say, oh, somebody give you attendance to look after. And I was like, I really wanted to try and tackle it, but in a positive way. And what I identified was the present mark, the absent mark, and the authorized absence mark. And I was saying, okay, can somebody because I was, as an educator, I was like, can somebody walk me through what the authorised absence is? And they were saying, it's where somebody's let us know that they can't come into the building to learn that day. And I was like, okay, so they've let us know that they have a driving lesson, that they have caring responsibilities, that whatever reason. But they've taken the ownership, and they've taken the adult responsibility to say, look, I can't make it in. There's a reason. They've let you know in advance. Otherwise, it's an absence. And I said, is it a positive mark on the register? And they said, no, it's a neutral mark on the register. We went through all this thing of what neutral actually means. And I was like, if it's not getting you to 100, then actually it's a negative. So we had all this conversation, and I said, we need to be able to tackle it better. I said, for these people, let me speak to some of them. I'm just going to pick a handful and walk through and have a look at some of the reasons and have some conversations with some of these students, see whether they have the ability and want to learn. So we created this whole structure around what was then the I mark. It became something where students who had access, and we were in the cloud teaching learning, as long as they had a device between the hours of 7, I think it was 7 or 6 a.m. on a Monday morning till 7 or 6 a.m. on a Sunday evening, they could make progress in learning when they couldn't do so at the time for whatever reason, whether they were looking after children, like I say, caring responsibilities, they literally just couldn't afford the bus fare in, but wanted to still continue to learn. And we then saw it as a present mark. And the college loved it, because from the leaders, they were like, oh, it's actually getting our attendance up. Look, so when Ofsted come, it's a positive thing. But I was like, that was never the reason why I ever took the project on. The project was to ensure that those people who were passionate about and had challenges to come into the four walls of a building were supported to make progress. They wanted to learn, but we were saying, don't worry about it. I know you've told us, but when you come to apply for a job or university or whatever your next steps are, we're actually going to say you've got 95% attendance, even though you wanted to learn. We did all of this work around it, and device access and connectivity and loads of different stuff. And it's one of the things that I always remember, because I remember having conversations and capturing the information in terms of the success. I actually did some research, which at the beginning I said it was so scary, around the impact it had on individuals. And I remember Ofsted coming in and really challenging us on it, saying, it looks like you're trying to hide attendance figures. And I was like, this is not what it's about. Look to the project, speak to some students. So we had a massive case study from lots of different learners from a variety of reasons, saying, I just couldn't afford the bus fare. I would have had to walk for an hour. I had to look after mum and everything else. And I loved it. I just thought it was, it wasn't me. I kind of was involved in the project, but I think there needs to be more of it, and people making those decisions for the right reason. Yes, it improved attendance and absolutely wonderful, but that wasn't the reason why I was ever involved in the project and wanted to do it. It was around giving people the opportunity that wanted to learn, the ability to do it when they couldn't do so at that time. So yeah,
I think as well, where the trauma-informed practice comes in is understanding that the learner is maybe not always ready to learn at that point in time as well. So even, when the learner comes through, we use the word success, and I'm always a little bit uncomfortable with that, because it depends on how you measure success. For a college leading with empathy and vision, success is getting someone to engage in education who wasn't doing that before. And if they're not ready to continue their educational journey there and then they've removed some barriers around coming back into education when that learner is maybe ready. And that might be in some years' time. They might need to come back. And the whole ethos of the trauma-informed practice is understanding that the learner maybe doesn't just need a second chance or a third chance or a fourth chance. And that's where, when you think about what is a college, who is it for? Is it just that you go, and if it's not successful for you, if you want to put that in inverted commas the first time, does that mean that education experience is over for you and never open to you again? That's not what colleges are about. Certainly not what colleges are doing in Scotland. They are providing more and more chances for learners to come back in. And it's great to see that if someone does come into something like the Trust Project and feels that they're not able or ready to continue their educational journey, then they know that the door's still open for them. And there's that ripple effect into the community as well. It means that coming back to college is not seen as, it comes back to that idea of creating safe spaces and, removing the gaps between the learners and the college, or the communities and the college as well. What we see with the trauma-informed is multi-agency approach to using the college as well. The agencies, it's highlighted in the report, are delighted that they can actually utilise the space at the college. It's bringing in community groups. So it's so much more than, you know, the learner coming in and either been successful or not. And that's what we really have tried to pull out in the reports, that our learners are changing. We're in a changing sort of socio-economic situation at the moment as well. But also our colleges are changing, and colleges are really flexible. Colleges are really adaptable, and they can respond so much quicker, I think, to some of the bigger sort of agencies out there or the institutions. So they're doing fantastic work, and hopefully by shining a light on this trauma-informed practice, as we see this is adopted, and not just adopted, not just given lip service to, but actually embedded. This is where our enhancement work comes in, is really actually embedding this great practice, because everybody wins, whether it's the outside agencies, whether it's the learner themselves. Also the college is winning, because as you say, if someone's coming in who was constantly, you know, absent on the register, they start coming into college, they start to see a bit of value in themselves, then, you know, that the learner's winning and the college is winning there as well. So it's good for everybody.
Yeah, and it feels very much that this is that holistic thing that we keep banging on about, and you've talked about this evening, this idea that we can't just take a learner at face value. You can't just think of them as an exam grade or you want to get them from one place to another place on the exam grade, and actually that's a linear process. And actually one of the things that we regularly talk about is this conveyor belt version of education, that somehow everything is going to be like Henry Ford's conveyor belt. It's like you just do that, and then they do this bit, and then they do this bit, and there's, it's like what's that cookie cutter mentality. And actually what we're saying here is that young people are not just young people, learners full stop, people full stop, are individuals that have got these ACEs, that have got they're dealing with their own stuff right now, like Steve was just talking about in terms of the stuff that he did with the IMI. We are also got some people learn really fast in certain ways, and some people are not showing, they may be neurodiverse, so therefore they've got all sorts of things that are mitigating factors. And we need research that explains the impact of this and explains how to maybe mitigate for this, or how to not just mitigate, because that sounds like almost like dismiss it. What I mean by is literally consider this. And I love that stuff you're talking about in terms of like providing safe spaces, thinking about, I've read the stuff that you talked about in terms of addressing things that should not exist in the 21st century, and certainly shouldn't exist in a developed country like ours, like things like period poverty. That's just absolutely it just blows my mind that is a real thing, and it is a real thing. And I'm seeing some wonderful things that are happening across the UK of people, but it feels a little bit like we're having to do it in isolation, or do it because somebody's got a passion about it, not because it's a human right, not because it's that we have a responsibility to do this for people. And I think what I've really taken from the research around my research about your research, reading around that stuff, is that this doesn't seem to just be about how do we make people learn better, although that is part of it. Actually, we're talking about the person becoming their full self. We had a guy on, I'm ranting now, I'm doing a Steve. We had a guy on from called David from the Intellicare Academy. Put my teeth back in, from Intellicare, and he was talking about this idea about helping people fulfill their potential, and like their whole potential, not just their academic potential. And that's what I'm hearing here, and that's what's really, I think, resonated as we've been listening tonight, is that resonance about whole person development, and helping people move on with whatever area that they need to.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, Ben. And I think you said earlier on that, you know, it's people we're talking about, and we all talk about pupils, learners, students, but actually they're all just people, and everybody's a learner at some point in there. And as Paula said earlier on, increasingly lifelong learning and the nature of work means that you're going to kind of come back into learning at various points in your life. And so the whole model that we're looking at will change in the next few decades in terms of that, what you were talking about, becomes the cookie cutter or whatever, you know, that's going to be, we're going to move away from that as a model, because people's lives just aren't like that anymore. And there's a shift going on that this is responding to. So it is about the whole person. It's about the right environment for an individual. And often, as Paul has described, that kind of process of bringing them into, say, the colleges, often it's people who school's not the right environment for. And let's just be open about it. It's just not the right learning environment for them. And maybe a college is. And actually having that, and that's where the overlap, I think, in the colleges we work with, in that they do teach hires, they teach at kind of that, what we call senior phase level in Scotland. That's increases choice, increases options for people who might not be taken to school but can come into college. And that's a really powerful situation. And that's some of the other work that we're doing at the moment, is on how you manage that transition from one part of the system to another, and how we improve and smooth that choice making of where do you go at certain points in your career.
Totally agree. Yeah, Steve.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I was just going to come in. I think it's been fascinating tonight. I think the whole thing around how research is leading to reports, but also the action, and people talk about action research and everything else, but actually to see it and to see the report and the third report of how an organisation has embraced it, taken it on, and I suppose demonstrated a blueprint of the art of the possible for others, and kind of leading the way for. It'd be interesting to see the college's social media saying, "Come on, we're leading now. Follow us," kind of the market leaders and everything else, and come get behind it and see how an organisation can take it and apply it. And I think it applies to every sector. And it's great that Scotland, I think Scotland has been interconnected into its sectors for many years, and other countries do definitely need to follow with the online learning and the dispersity in terms of the ability to access internet in terms of rural communities in the Highlands and Islands and things like that. So I think that Scotland has been, and it's great to see them leading the way in many different things, is what I'm trying to say, really. I think it's been a really, really good conversation. I think there's many, many different things that people will be excited to follow up on. What we'll do, we'll drop it in. There'll be a blog coming out, and we'll link into that for those people who subscribe to the newsletter. And we'll share out far and wide the links to the reports and CDN in terms of what you guys are trying to achieve in the case study around Midlothian. But it's been an absolute pleasure. I've really enjoyed tonight. It's taken the thought away from the cold snow and the warmth of trying to focus on learners and learners first always, rather than just grades and outcomes and money that they generate is definitely something that we need to lead the way in and push forward. So Paula and Gordon, it's been absolutely wonderful, and really appreciate you coming on tonight.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having us. It's been great to be here.
Yeah, thanks. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
1,